This press conference is to discuss the subject of the Bermuda economy and to give Bermudians an update, a half-year update as to where we are, particularly since the last major debate we had on the economy during the budget debate. My remarks will basically center around two main areas: the global environment in which Bermuda operates in. So Bermuda is pretty much a satellite of the United States, the U.S. being the sun and Bermuda being the earth. So whatever happens there has a major impact on what happens here. So let's start off with what's going on with the U.S. economy. Now I have given you a few graphs which I'd like to talk to at this point in time. About 80% of the U.S. economy is driven by consumer spending. So your first chart is a chart on people's intention to spend, consumers' intention to spend. This is the first chart, which is has a red and a blue graph. And you can see that those respondents who were going to spend less really increased during the period of the recession, the onset of the recession. And as the recovery took hold, those people who were going to spend less actually declined, and those who were going to spend more increased. So we've kind of had a comeback in consumer spending, meaning that consumers are sort of hesitating in their spending, and this is causing a major concern about the strength and the resilience of the U.S. economy, and also has implications, direct implications for us in terms of tourism. The next graph in front of you is one of U.S. personal savings. Basically, people can only do two things with their money. They can either save it or spend it. And so if the saving rate goes up, that means they're spending less. And you'll see from this chart, savings really spiked during the recession, but when the economy recovered, savings went down, but unfortunately we've seen another rise in the savings rate. So this also causes concern about the strength of the recovery. The next chart has to do with unemployment. We've all heard on the news about the unemployment rate, and this chart shows that it briefly hit 10%. It has declined from 10%, but you can see that it hasn't declined that much. And this is a major concern because when people are not working, they won't spend money and they won't drive the economy. The last, so it's not the last chart, the second to last chart, has to do with the Consumer Confidence Index. Again, another chart having to do with how much people are likely to spend. As you can see from this graph, consumer confidence plummeted during the last recession of 2008, and it really hasn't recovered very much from then. So this all feeds into the fact that people are unemployed, they're being very careful with their money, and so the likelihood of them spending it either in the United States or in Bermuda is a lot less. Lastly, there is a chart here on the percent change in housing prices in the United States. Housing has taken a big hit in the U.S., and in fact, this chart shows that on average, housing prices in the United States are still declining. They're still declining. So one's sense of wealth is hugely diminished if the price of one's home is worth less than it used to be. So these are the kind of factors that are affecting consumers, consumer spending in the States. There are many other indicators that I won't bore you with, but one of the concerns in the U.S. is whether or not the U.S. is going to experience something called a double dip recession. In other words, we've had a recession, we've come out from it, are we going to go back? I think most of the indicators that I have seen indicate that this is not likely to happen. Note I said it's not likely to happen. I didn't say it wasn't going to happen. but it's not likely to happen. But we look like we're going to be sort of bouncing along the bottom here for quite some time in the future. So that's the outlook for the U.S. economy. It's no growth or slow growth. So that's what we have to do. That's what we have to deal with. I think for the next 6 months, maybe even to a year. How does that affect us here in Bermuda? Well, weak U.S. consumer spending and high savings rates equals poor prospects for tourism. It's a very simple equation. And so we have to try to do our best in tourism in terms of attracting people to Bermuda, but the background economic environment in the United States continues to be very poor for tourism. And there is also data to show that one of the worst areas is the area where people's spending habits for actual vacation is concerned. A lot of people are still doing what they call nowadays. They've coined this phrase called staycation. Right? There's still a lot of staycationing going on in the United States, where people are just taking vacation at home. So this is not good for tourism, and we have to be aware of that. The main driver in our economy, as we all know, is international business. The situation there is better. There were major concerns for international business as it related to the financial markets and the meltdown in the financial markets in 2008 and 9. Those problems seem to be primarily behind international business, particularly the insurance and reinsurance sector. Those problems seem to be pretty much a thing of the past now. And so we're sort of in a more normalized situation with the insurance sector, except the prospects and the uncertainty as it relates to the attitude of Washington, D.C. relative to offshore insurance. You will be aware of what happened to Switzerland's bank secrecy business when the U.S. decided to put Switzerland in their crosshairs. They basically no longer have secrecy in Switzerland because the U.S. made it so. We don't want a similar thing to happen to Bermuda as it relates to insurance and reinsurance. So the uncertainty as it relates to our status relative to taxes in Washington, and this has come about because the U.S. government is still desperate for revenue. So that uncertainty is the cloud that continues to hang over the reinsurance business in Bermuda, and because of it, basically, we're not likely to see any big increases in capital coming to Bermuda like after 9/11 or anything like that. So the overall sort of picture with international business, I think, is steady as she goes, which is, under the circumstances, not a bad thing at all. Now, I want to talk about the construction industry. There's not much data to go on in the construction sector in Bermuda, but there's plenty of stories, plenty of anecdotal evidence. And the anecdotal evidence clearly states that the construction industry in Bermuda is experiencing a major recession. Unfortunately, the government of Bermuda does not have much ammo left to fight that recession. Basically, they shot their bullets during good times. There's not many bullets left in the clip. So there are a few things, I think, projects they can do. There's still some Bermuda Housing Corporation things around. The hospital hasn't come online yet. Hospital project hasn't come online. That'll be a major one. But outside of that, the government's capacity to stimulate major activity in the construction sector is very limited indeed. The sector is characterized by high unemployment, something new to Bermuda, but high unemployment, high and rising unemployment.